Many people are drawn to Boston's fall colors, but on October 20th and 21st, many of them will be watching the head of the Charles Regatta. Now in its 54th year, it's expected the competition will attract 11,000 rowers from around the country and the world. To tell us about the tradition, the flavor, and this year's event is the Regatta's executive director since 1991. Fred Schoch, thank you very much for being with us.
Good afternoon.
Fred, there must be other places with scenic rivers and a lot of colleges around. So why is this, Kentucky Derby of regattas happening here?
I said that other day, I think it really is the confluence of the degree of difficulty of the course, because the Charles River, starting at the Boston University Bridge, goes under 7 bridges and makes 2 reverse turns before finishing down in Brighton at the finish line 3 miles away. So I think the degree of difficulty, the natural shore banks that are groomed carefully by our Parks and Rec teams that has allowed, because we have so many universities, we're deep in rowing schools in Boston, but then it just became a festival of sorts because there's so many things to see and do on the weekend.
Well, a lot of the time in the fall, that river can be pretty placid, the weather can be pretty pleasant, but not all the time. I mean, these rowers, they must put up with some things along the way.
We've only had really disastrous conditions twice, and one was 1996 when we had that sort of 100-year storm. The only time we get into trouble, serious trouble, is when we have a strong east wind coming off the ocean that builds up the waves in the basin and then makes it difficult for the boats to turn and start down the race course. So,
no, the spectators, they see this sort of a knife blade zipping down the river. It looks easy. I have hard enough time doing a canoe in the backwater. I mean, what's it like for a rower? What's the exertion?
It's preparation, preparation, preparation. It's really on all rowers' bucket list to come to Boston and compete. It's like the marathon in that regard. A storied event. It takes a lot of hard work. Single scullers and teams. We have all age groups represented at the head of the Charles. We have youth rowers in their early teens all the way up to octogenarians. So in different age groups divided in 10-year increments.
No, I imagine a lot of the turnout will be people from the colleges watching their teams, but what about the world picture here?
Well, I think in terms of crews coming to compete, we have 24 different nations represented this year. So it's on the international rowing calendar as an event to come to. And then, we draw spectators from, inside. Probably 60% of our spectators are inside 50 miles or 100 miles, I think it is. And then outside of 100 miles, the other 40% come. So we have representation all over the United States.
Events like this, they also invoke a tradition, even going back before the first year in 1965. Mm-hmm. Your father was part of that tradition. Tell us about it.
Yeah, no, I was lucky enough to be born into a rowing family. My father was born and raised on the West Coast and ended up being recruited for football at the University of Washington in Seattle. And fortunately for him, or he probably didn't think so at the time, he was injured, and he went down to the Shell House, and he became a part of that legendary Boys in the Boat era crew in the early 30s. And he actually made the Olympic team and went with them to Germany and raced. He didn't race personally; he was the spare man, as they call it, in case someone got injured. But they were victorious and. Rowing in front of Hitler. In fact, a funny story, apparently the coach gave him a camera, an 8mm camera, and said, "Go to the finish line, Dutch, and take a picture of the cruise so we have a record of it." And apparently he was blocking Hitler's view, and he was being yelled at by, by soldiers to get out of the way.
Coming back to Boston, people, at least on these college teams, they get out in the river all the time. Right. No one's looking at them. But what's it like for them during the regatta? And you look around in one bank and the other.
Rowers really look forward to the head of the Charles because it's an alumni gathering, if you will, of all, and that's where all the institutions use it as a way to bring everyone back together. It's very exciting to row in front of a large crowd like the head of the Charles generally will draw on a nice day. Rowing is sort of an unheralded sport. Most of the time it's just family and friends on the shores. And it's a difficult sport to watch because it's not, timeouts or dribble, dribble, shoot. It's, start and then, 6 minutes later or less, the finish occurs. So I think it's very exciting, and then particularly with the bridges, enabling people to stand on the bridges and watch them come. It's good.
Well, you have the river, you have some infrastructure, but it takes more of that to get them to come, and you had to go and get some help from some sponsors too.
Yes, I think to make the regatta really the best event that we could, which enables us to invest in timing equipment and take care of our volunteers. We have almost 1,800 volunteers on the weekend. I know probably the marathon eclipses that, but that's a good number for a 2-day rowing event. We're very grateful to the support we have from BNY Mellon. They've been with us 6 years now and have extended their relationship with us. So that's very fortuitous. Apparel company, Brooks Brothers, Aston Martin, Delta Airlines. So we have a good series of brands. This year we picked up Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, a local brand here, and Alexandria Real Estate Equities. So we have a good stock of partners that make us all the better.
Well, you mentioned timing, 11,000 rowers in 2 days. You got to figure out how to not have them bunch up. How does that work?
Okay, so here's the deal. So unlike the marathon where it's a mass start, well, in waves, rowing in the Head of the Charles, a head race, is timed, each boat is timed individually. So there are cameras, redundant systems on top of the Boston University boathouse, and as each crew goes by, a plunger is hit and a time is recorded, and the same thing happens at various substations along the way and then the finish line. So we have cameras that record it, and we've had races decided by as little as a thousandth of a second.
Now, I imagine back in '65, people would line up on either side of the river and just watch the boats. But these days, you want to know what's going on, and you've got a web dimension here too.
We do. We have an app that'll be launching. If it hasn't launched already, it should be launched by this week. HOCR.org is our website, but there's an app there that will enable people to check the results real time. Yeah.
Now, one of the other things about this event, maybe we take it for granted by now, but there must be some ripple effect, all these people coming into the city, checking out Boston.
Good segue for economic development and impact. The regatta has been attributed this year. The Boston Greater Convention and Visitors Bureau has pegged the number at $72 million in economic impact. And so that's spending by visiting spectators, spending by sponsors, and then respending by vendors and restaurants if they pay a staff member, and then a staff member goes to the store and buys something. So it's a good number. And then the towns, Boston and Cambridge, both benefit from meals and lodging taxes as well.
We should mention you've got the website, so if we can remind people one more time.
Yes, HOCR.org. Yep.
Right, thank you very much for being with us.
Very good.
Fred Schoch from the Head of the Charles Regatta.